When I was buying real estate, I was like, okay, cool. I've got to have assets that generate cash flow. And I'll be honest, the first property that I bought way back in the day, it generated like $300 in cash flow. And I was like, cool, this is phenomenal. It's buying, it's paying my
Mhm.
car payments. But now, if I'm buying properties that generate, let's just say today, $200 in cash flow, that's decent. But if I want $10,000 a month in net spendable income, if I divide that by 200, $200 in cash flow, that's 50 properties.
Yep.
And that's assuming all 50 properties give me my full rent every single month. So I probably
Yep.
have to have 75 properties to net $10,000 a month in cash flow. Yes?
Yeah, correct.
So now we're right back to Robert Kiyosaki's original premise, savers or losers. I probably can't save enough money to put enough down payments to buy 75 properties, yeah?
Correct.
So let's actually look at this. If I bought a $200,000 property, okay, just bought it and held it, $200,000 property, and it was cash flow positive. I had 30% of the total cash flow going to cover vacancy and make readies, and my rent increased. I put on average by 2%, and I just held this thing for 10 years. Now to buy this property, I'm gonna have to put in about $40,000 plus closing costs. That's what I'm putting in, and if I just look at this from my net cash collected. Like, if I just look at real estate from a cash on cash and an internal rate of return perspective, I'm like, this sucks, man. I collected $20,000 of cash over 10 years. Okay. My average cash collected per year with the low years in the beginning and slowly raising my rent over time, over 10 years, is about $2,000 per year. My annualized ROI is 5%, but my IRR, I haven't even got all my money back that I put into the equation, right? My IRR on my cash on cash return is still negative. It's negative 10.9%.
Mhm.
This is why it's easy to argue against real estate when compared to just about anything else. Because I look at that, I'm like, what the crap, man? I mean, I don't even have my money back yet. Yeah. But what's actually happened? I've owned the asset, I've held the asset, and time, because of the economic conditions that we live in today, time's just working for me, right? And so over time, if I own and hold that asset, and we've seen this, I know you've seen this in Tennessee, and I'll actually justify this here in just a minute. The purchase price, I'm not going to say the value, but I'm going to say the purchase price of that house went from $200,000 10 years ago. That same house would cost me about $299,000 10 years from now or today.
Yep.
Now, over this period of time, I would have had tenants in this property, and I did include a 30% vacancy inside of this. So if I had my property occupied, excuse me, 20% vacancy. So if I had my property occupied 80% of the time, tenants would have amortized my debt. And even if they didn't amortize it, I'm amortizing it. My debt got amortized one way or the other by 20,000 bucks. So check that out. I mean, I amortized my debt just by as much cash flow as I collected. I collected 20,000 in cash flow and my debt was amortized by 20,000. So now if I look at this, my total mortgage on the property after amortizing it by, 20,000 is let's see, I don't have the total mortgage listed here, but I have equity of $182,000 in this property. My annualized ROI, because I only put a 20% down, my tenants paid down my mortgage and my property appreciated is 40%. My IRR on just owning the asset is 19%.
Right.
How
Yeah,
you
I'm
feeling
tracking
about
so
that
far.
math?
Yeah, so there's the cash flow collected, and then there's the equity, and you have to look at both of those, and yeah, so I'm tracking so far.
Okay. This is where it's going to get bonkers. Now, a lot of people, they misunderstand the asset that they own, right? 12% of their comprehensive return came from cash flow. 88% of their return came from owning the asset and letting time make them wealthy, with amortization, inflation driving up the cost of the real estate, and the equity that's generated because of that.
Mhm.
Right. So if that's all true, and let's just justify this out, right? I mean, we can look back over the compound annual growth rate of real estate, from the beginning of 1965 all the way to today in 2026, the average is 5.4%, right? And, 2020 time, it went nutso bonkers crazy. But the average is if I just own an asset and hold it by default, the purchase price, not the value, but the purchase price of the property is going to go up by 5.4% every single year. And here's a property that I own. This property is in Indianapolis, so nothing crazy special. I've owned this property now for about 8 years, but this property was built back in 1950s. Okay, so let's just look at the history of just this one property. So if we go all the way back to 1950, from 1950 to 1960, if I just bought and held the property, right, the property went from $7,000. Man, that's how much this property sold for back in the 1950s. And 10 years later, I'd buy the same property for 12,000. So a 71% increase increase in the price of real estate over a 10-year period of time. Okay, and if we go from 1960 to 1970, 12,000 to 17,000, 42% increase in the price of the real estate. From 1970 to 1980, 17,000 to 47,000. That's a
Bonkers.
176% increase. And this is, now we're going to take just a moment. I want to have a dialogue about this part right here. Um, just owning the assets, it went up by 176%, the price of the property. Now, the two of us know, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners of your channel know, in 1971, I love the way Kiyosaki puts this. The game of money changed. The rules of the game of money changed. So what happened in 1971, Caleb?
Let's just say gold. Gold was the topic of conversation there.
Yeah. So you're
We went up to
exactly
gold
right.
standard. Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, our monetary policy to inject more currency into the marketplace, it required a tangible, asset, gold, to back that dollar. And so, like, look, we live in a world today where it's easy to say savers are losers, but that's a really controversial thing, right? I mean, I remember when I read Kiyosaki's book, dude, I thought he was crazy because I've always been a good saver. Like you, like I was born saving. I have no problem saving. That's
Yep.
not hard for me. But it wasn't until I fully understood what I'm about to share with you here. In 1950, 1960, 1970, and even through the beginning part of the 80s for a different reason, savers were actually winners.
Hmm.
You could save your way to retirement, right? People weren't living quite as long, but the primary reason was the dollar maintained its value. I could save a dollar, get a decent interest rate, and the cost of living was such that I knew that I could live off of that interest rate because the cost of living wasn't going crazy. In 1971, when we went off the gold standard, if we just look at this tracking of inflation, up until the year 2000, it wasn't crazy, it wasn't amazing, but it wasn't crazy. And also in 1981, companies stopped doing pensions and money just flooded into the market. So if you had
Yep.
money in the market, you could millionaire your what is that? The millionaire next door, your way to retirement.
Hmm.
But in 2000, you can kind of see what's happened since this. Beginning in 2000 all the way to today, the monetary supply, the amount of money floating around in our economy has gone up by 375%, Caleb.
It's crazy. Yep.
That's nuts. Like that is by definition, I cannot outwork the rate at which the government is injecting new currency into the marketplace. It's not possible. I can't do it. I'm fighting a battle, especially if I'm talking about 10 years or less.
Yep. I'm with you, and you articulated the problem, I think, very, very well. And so thank you for even showing this graph because I think it really illustrates the savers are losers concept. And yeah, if you're saving and you're losing to inflation, your literal dollars are getting less valuable every year.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't morally agree with the economic system that we're born into. It infuriates me, man. Especially when you know as much as you and I know. We've gone down the rabbit hole. We know what the Federal Reserve is. We know how that was created. So, I mean, it was a really dark season in my life when I learned what I learned because I realized that we are in a system designed to keep us trapped. It is designed to oppress people with monetary choices or with monetary policy that we don't get a vote in. We do not get to choose the monetary policy that our government implements. They are printing again $40 billion starting in December of last year per month right now. They're just printing. It's the only way the system can survive. So we could go down that rabbit hole as deep as we want to go, but let's just go back to our holding assets. If we go from 1980 to 1990, the average purchase price of that same single family home went from 47 to 79 and 68% increase. From 1990 to 2000, 79 to 119,000, a 51% increase. From 2000 to 2010, this includes 2008, purchase prices went from 119 to 222. There was a dip, not across the board, but in some locations, but it still cost 87% more to buy the same asset. Why? It's not any more valuable. It's just because there's more money floating around in the economy. And then I just lumped the last 15 years together. From 2010 to 2025, it went from 222,000 to 495.
Wow.
So you're seeing a theme here, right?
Yes.
So if we're seeing this theme, I'm going to put Jerome Powell up here, right? He's just cranking the printing press, boom, 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 printing out money. But here's the thing we got to consider. So the red line here is the increase in monetary supply. The blue line is the increase in the cost of real estate. Now, for our podcast listeners, what are these two lines doing?